Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to my naturopathic beekeeping course webinar, my talk all about naturopathic beekeeping. So thank you very much for joining me on this cold and frosty day. So I'm going to talk you through some of the factors that make naturopathic beekeeping so special and particularly important at this time. So here we go, and welcome, and let me share with you what I know about naturopathic beekeeping, and it's what I do. So on every webinar, I have a certain percentage of people who want to go deeper on whatever topic I'm covering and to get more personal help. So to that end, I'm going to tell you about a rare opportunity to be part of my live online course on naturopathic beekeeping, which starts on January the 14th. So it's live because you'll get to talk to me in real time, and it's online, so you can attend anywhere as long as you have internet. So wherever you are in the world, you can join. So it may be just what you're looking for right now or another time. So I will be leading the course. I do it about twice a year. So I ran it last autumn, and I'm running it again starting next week. So regardless of whether you're going to join now or whether you think it would be good later, it's good that you know that I do it. So you just have to keep an eye out for what I have running. So you can use what you've learned on all my free webinars and my challenges, and that will help you get started on your own. But having me to work with you can make the whole process a lot easier. It can make it quicker and easier, a bit more effective, and hopefully more enjoyable. So here we go. I've just made that a bit bigger so you can read the words. You don't need to see me so big. So I love this quote: "Those who know how to treat bees do not need to fear their sting." And that's a Slovenian saying. And in Slovenia, they've been keeping bees for thousands of years, and they really know how to keep their bees and how to work alongside them. And I love this because it makes us think more about why bees are stinging and what we can do so that we minimize our stings. And perhaps if we listen more to the bees rather than just thinking about ourselves, then we don't need to fear the sting so much. So it's all about understanding why bees might sting and what you can do to protect yourself. And the bees die when they sting, so they don't really want to sting you because they're losing their lives. So let's find out a bit more about bees. So I'm Paula Carnell, and I believe the bees are the key to saving the planet. And we all hear about saving the bees, but is keeping bees the best way to save them and us? So what do I do? I'm a naturopathic beekeeper. So I work with all kinds of different types of hives, and I work using naturopathic principles, which I've learned for my own health and well-being, and I've transferred into the care of bees. So I have a bee team. So here's my team. There's me on the left, then there's Randy, Kerry, Linda, and Joe. And between us, we've got over 100 years of beekeeping experience. So we're all a bit older than we look. So what I'd like you to do is add your questions, insights, or comments as we go. So just put them in the comments, and they'll come up, and then I will look at them at the end, and then I can do a questions and answers. So rather than interrupting the flow, it's just great if, as you come up with questions, just type them in, and then we'll have a look at the end. So the biggest risk to bees is beekeepers. Now, this is what a very well respected bee scientist, Peter Neumann, who is the president of Colos, which is a colony loss study group, he believes. And this is quite a controversial thing because we all think of beekeepers as being the carers of bees and being these amazing people who are in tune with the bees. And yet right now we're finding that there's a lot of practices that goes on in beekeeping that is risking the bees. So you have to understand that all beekeepers, they do love their bees, but it all comes down to education and understanding more about the insects that we care so much. So what can we do? What is going wrong? What is going right? And why do I keep bees? It's really important to think about why you keep the bees. It's not just a selfish act. Quite often people keep bees just for the honey. And that could be the initial way you keep bees. But looking after bees is a real responsibility. And it's not just as simple as going out to a hive and filling up a jar with honey. They do take care. You've got 50,000 bees that have complex needs. So originally I wanted to keep bees because I just felt this need. I was drawn to them. I felt that there was something that I needed to know, I needed to learn about from the bees. At the time, I was bedbound and wheelchair bound. I knew I wasn't going to return to my career as an artist. And so I had to think about things I could do. So very much in the same way that all of us are having to adapt now, it's thinking about what we can do rather than grieving for what we can't. I really loved Bathsheba Everdeen, being a Dorset girl and having read a lot of Thomas Hardy. I really loved her character of this strong woman. And there's a scene in the film with Julie Christie where she's catching a swarm of bees with her skep, and I just thought that's what a beekeeper should look like. It fits with what an artist beekeeper should look like. And of course we know that Winnie the Pooh, he loves his bees. So my childhood was growing up thinking about bees and honey. But now I understand it's more about learning from the bees. So here I am with my first hive that was a present from my husband. And I had no idea then, so I'm in my 10th year now, but I had no idea then how much I would learn from the bees, and also the comparisons between bee health and human health, which is so vital to the work I do. But I'm realizing now it's vital for all of us because we really can learn from the bees. And perhaps what's killing the bees is also killing us. So, of course, there are benefits of beekeeping. You have the honey, there's the health and well-being. If you're actually caring for bees, then you have to be in quite a calm state. You go into what's called bee time, where you're with the hives and you forget everything else around you, which is really good for your health and well-being. It's good for conservation, because when you start thinking about bees and taking care of bees, you start to become more aware of what they need around them, what we need to feed them, and what we can do to help them. And also for pollination. 2/3 of our food is pollinated by bees, and it's not just honeybees, it's the other native bees. And I do talk with some of my other presentations about the importance of the native pollinators and how they have been decimated by agricultural practice and the environment that we are creating. And therefore, that's putting more pressure on the honeybees because we need them to actually pollinate the food that our native bees are no longer around or equipped to pollinate for us. So conventional beekeeping versus natural beekeeping. Obviously, with conventional beekeeping, it tends to be all about the honey. It's a honey business, and it's fine. There are bee farmers who need to have honey. That is their livelihood, that is their business. But is that absolutely essential for the small individual beekeepers? Then there's treatments. There's a lot of chemical treatments are used in hives. And I'm mainly talking about the small beekeepers. This isn't just all the big companies that we tend to put in the bad corner, thinking that all the big companies are awful. It's not always about that. Some of the bigger honey producers, they've had to learn that they have to minimize the interaction and a lot of the practices that they were doing with their bees because it wasn't best for their health. And to produce honey in a sustainable way, you've got to have healthy bees. There's a lot of queen clipping to stop the bees from swarming, drone culling, disease prevention and cure. It's very much chemical based and very intrusive on the bees. But it's what people have been taught to do. It's what was led to believe was the only way to combat disease and the pests and all the problems that bees were finding that were killing colonies. And also the habitat. what we have to appreciate is that if the bees are in a habitat that is toxic, so if you're moving bees to an area where they're going to be feeding on poisoned crops, then that's not going to be any good for the bees. So that's the sort of basic foundation of conventional beekeeping. So with the natural beekeeping, it's not all about the honey. So honey can be a byproduct of it, but it's not your main goal for keeping the bees. Natural beekeeping is treatment free. So it means you're not using any chemicals inside the hive, because more and more science is backing up that there is an effect. Whatever chemical you put into a hive, there is an effect. And we have to be aware of that effect, because sometimes the effects are worse than the initial problem that people are having or trying to combat. So you can use bee gyms. You can actually be breeding bees to be more resistant, which is a lot of what I do, allowing bees to have their natural course that they will do to keep themselves healthy. It's allowing them to produce propolis. It's allowing them to swarm. So that's a very different way. And it isn't a case of having a hive and ignoring it. In some ways, by keeping bees in a natural way, it is a larger time commitment, because you're having to spend a lot more time observing the bees and seeing what they're doing, but from the outside rather than opening up the hives. So this is the observation rather than the intervention. So with conventional beekeeping, you're encouraged to open up the hive every week. Well, I've learned that it takes up to 10 days for a colony to restore its core temperature after it's been opened. So that means that through our beekeeping season, you have bees that are in a state of fight and flight, trying to restore their temperature, their core temperature, so that they can care for their brood. So just a simple thing like that can have an incredible knock-on. And although it is wonderful to open a hive to smell all the aromas of the wax and the honey and the propolis, we do have to be aware of the consequences of doing that with a colony, and particularly if the weather is not warm enough. So with natural beekeeping, it is much more about prevention rather than cure. So it's looking at what we can do to keep our bees strong, keep their immunity strong, so that we're not having to resort to chemical treatments or any kind of intrusive treatment. We're actually rearing bees that are strong and resilient and can live alongside pests and diseases without the detrimental effect to their life. So I love this quote as well from Heidi Herman. So we don't want a farmer with 1 million hives, but 1 million people with one hive. And when you go back in time, that is very much what beekeeping was all about. Most families would have their own hive in their garden, and all around the world, people were self-sufficient, and they would grow enough fruit and veg for themselves. And then they would have one colony of bees that would actually feed their pollinate their garden, pollinate their fruit and veg, and it would just be what they needed. And then they would have just enough honey to give them the sweetness through the year. So that might be a better way of looking at it, is having what we need and taking care of our locality rather than trying to industrially produce honey to feed the world. So that's what I'm all about, is looking at a more natural way and a more sustainable way of keeping bees, rather than looking at the now what's collapsing, this sort of old system of business of exploiting everything bigger and better. It's all a case of thinking, what do we need for our small community? So bad, stressful beekeeping practices, what is it that is considered damaging for the bees? What is it that Peter Neumann was so concerned about? So there is the over manipulation, there's the opening up the hives more often than not for our own curiosity, not trusting the bees to be getting on with what they need to get on with, but opening it up, having a look, fiddling around. This over manipulation is stressful for the bees. You imagine if someone was lifting off the roof of your house and moving your furniture around and having a tinker and picking up your kids and having a look at them, it would cause a bit of stress. And not just the stress while it's happening, but that fear that it's going to happen again. And I did experience this where I had bought a colony from someone who was retiring, And they were a conventional beekeeper, and I bought the hive with the bees in it and I moved it into my garden, and I could sense that whenever I approached the hive wearing a white full bee suit, the bees were just like their whole buzz would change. They were thinking, oh no, it's those people in the white suits, and they were getting stressed out. So I had to learn. For a whole year I did not open that hive, and I would just go and sit with them. I wouldn't open it and just get them to be familiar with me. And then they became a really strong colony and one of my best honey producers, because we built a relationship and they knew to trust me in the end. So repeated transportation. You may or may not have heard of all the transportation of bees that goes across America, where they're using the bees for pollination. And the bees are actually put on these massive trucks throughout the year, and they're being shipped from one crop to the next. So they're going from the almonds, and they go to cherries, and it's all for the pollination, and it's essential. And that has to be done because the native population of bees have all been destroyed and wiped out. And so there's that need now for the honeybees. So this is a really serious situation. And those bees, although they're transported on big trucks, and the beekeepers, they love their bees, they care for their bees, they also know they're doing essential work. But there are accidents. Sometimes the trucks can be involved in crashes, or they can be stranded somewhere where they can't move. And then those bees, thousands upon thousands, millions of bees, all on one truck, all in the middle of somewhere where perhaps there isn't any food for them or enough water. And that is stressful. Taking all the honey. There's this wonderful research that showed that when bees are left their honey and they feel that they've got their stores full, they then spend time practicing grooming each other, which makes sense, doesn't it? They feel that they've got everything they need to get them through the winter, so then they can spend time improving their own health and hygiene. If you take all the honey, and the bees come to approaching autumn and winter, and they're like, oh my goodness me, we haven't got enough honey to get us through. And there may well be some big syrup feeders or big pollen patties or fondant to feed the bees. But how would you feel if you'd harvested your allotment and you had all this wonderful variety of beans and pumpkins and tomatoes and fruit and veg, and then it all got taken away and replaced with just bags of white sugar? You'd be devastated. And how would you think your health would be? How would you think you could look after yourself if you were to get ill during the winter months? So taking the honey is stressful. And if the bees, you can't just swap what the bees know is nutrition in their honey for plain white sugar. The bees know it's not medicine, it's not nutritious, and it's going to put their colony at risk. And so what do? They have to go out and they have to take nectar to make more honey as late as they can, which puts the colony at risk because they could be flying in wet weather, chilled weather, and it's just added stress. They've worked already so hard through the winter months, or through the summer months, to produce what they need for the winter months. Smoke. What does it really do to bees? Now, smoke was one of the first things that concerned me about beekeeping. And where I'd been ill, I'd learned that I had been suffering from fight or flight. My adrenal glands were completely kaput, and it was due to years and years of living in a stressful state. Even though I loved my business, I was an artist and I traveled, but perhaps part of being an artist as a livelihood, there was an element of stress, of trying to sell paintings, of trying to meet deadlines, of getting things framed, putting on exhibitions. And so I realized that there was this stress element. And when I first asked my mentor, why do we smoke the bees before we open them? So we all think of this lovely image of a beekeeper puffing away with this smoke, and we don't think of what harm it could be doing. And there's two reasons for smoking. The first one is that it warns the bees that you're coming and that you're going to open up the hive. And so what they do is they dive into the hive and they gorge their stomachs with honey, ready to leave the hive if they have to. Now, if that isn't a stressful response, I don't know what is. Just like if we thought our house was on fire, you'd go in, grab the kids, grab some food, grab a few photographs, you'd be in a stressed out state. The other reason for smoking is because the smoke masks the pheromones that the bees release when they feel under threat. So you're masking that alarm call. So just as if I was a mother and I was going, kids, get out the house, but I opened my mouth and no sound came out, I'd be quite stressed. So smoke, either way, is not a non-stressful action. So that was one of the first things that I decided not to do with keeping bees. Feeding sugar. Now, this image here is in Canada from a commercial beekeepers who have 5,000 hives, and Canada's quite a tricky place to keep bees. I mean, you've got amazing landscapes and there is some amazing forage, but they also have incredibly cold temperatures. And if you have as many as 5,000 hives, you cannot keep them outside through the winter. So they have these huge, great warehouses that are temperature controlled that they put the bees in. And this is a place where they move the bees around and take them to different crops. And Canada, over recent years, they found that corn, new varieties of genetically modified and treated corn, was contributing to mass death of bees as well. So we know that there's that connection. Now, because the honey is taken off from these bees, and because these bees are used a lot for pollination, some of the plants that they pollinate don't give enough nectar. They are only providing pollen. And so the bees get hungry. They don't get food from what they're pollinating. And so then they need sugar. So I was really stunned, because when we went and visited this place, I saw these tankers and I thought, gosh, they produce that much honey. They're transporting it in tankers. So when I commented on this, they went, oh, no, that's the sugar. That's the sugar syrup that we need to feed our bees. And they told me how much they spent on sugar syrup a year. And I was so shocked. And it was such a big number that I instantly forgot it. You know, when you hear a number and you're like, I can't believe it. I have got it written down somewhere, so I must find it again. But they're spending money on sugar because the bees don't have enough honey to feed them when they're pollinating. So, you know, if you're not aware that this goes on, this is what is happening. This is what we're doing to our bees. Chemical treatments. I mean, if you've got to wear masks and gloves to put it into a hive, what on earth is it doing to the bees? These are organic creatures. These are living organisms. And we're putting in treatments that are designed to kill other living organisms. So there's going to be an effect. There's going to be an effect on those poor bees. So thymol is one of those treatments that is supposedly natural, and it's using the essential oil thyme. But there is research that was showing that the sperm that has been exposed to comophos, which is one of the compounds in thyme, it's unviable. So the drones, the male bees, are becoming infertile. And then they found that formic acid and oxalic acid, it reduced drone production. So the bees were not even producing enough drones. Now, a queen will mate with between 15 and 48 male bees to give her sufficient sperm that she can lay 1,500 to 2,000 fertilized eggs a day through her lifetime. So you can imagine, if there are not enough drones, or if the drones that we have are not fertile enough, then it has a knock-on effect where the queen can't be laying eggs. And I must admit that 2020 was the first year in my 10 years of beekeeping that I observed a real difference in the fertility of queens and the availability of drones. So this is a real problem. So even when we think we're using natural products, everything has an effect. And the aromas inside a hive, the compounds, the scents, everything, the hormones, it's such a subtle balance that the bees have spent 150 million years perfecting. And we just go and chuck in any old thing, thinking it can do one thing, but not aware of the consequences of that. So I'm not saying we should be doing this kind of beekeeping of just sort of shuffling around on a tree and just catching wild bees. So how do we keep bees sustainably without smoke, sugar, or chemicals? So Professor Tom Seeley, I had to put this photo in because he is one of my heroes. He's many people's bee guru. And he says that swarms, drones, and mating are indicators of the fitness of a colony. So if a colony is not able to swarm, it doesn't have drones, then it gives you an idea that something isn't right inside the hive. And that is the complete reverse to how we are trained as beekeepers to observe a hive. So Tom Seeley, he advocates a method of beekeeping which he calls Darwinian beekeeping. And he says that that tells us that everything that colonies do when they are living on their own is done to favour their survival and reproduction. So this backs up what I say about observing the hive. We can learn from the bees from watching what they do in nature. And so Darwinian beekeeping is all about survival of the fittest. So much of my work is about finding and taking care of the wild colonies and allowing bees to have that freedom to act in a wild way, working to reproduce and survive themselves, because they really do know what is best. So your hive type, that can have a big difference on the stress involved on the bees. If they've got the right size hive where they can build the comb they want to have, then that, and having enough room, that can really help. So I use these bait hives, which are made by Matt Somerville of Be Kind Hives. And this is a bait hive for a golden hive. And it's designed so it's one deep box, so the bees can make one long piece of comb, which matches what they would do in the wild. It minimizes their stress of having different boxes, and it's not too big, and it's just the right size that bees are looking for when they're swarming to allow them to have a colony that will expand through the summer. So swarming, again, it's so vital that bees are allowed to swarm. And if you clip the queen's wings, it makes it very difficult, if not impossible, for a colony to swarm. And the swarming is the way where the old queen will leave with all the older bees, the flying bees, and then the colony that's left behind is the eggs and the nurse bees and the carer bees, the young bees. And what they will do is rear a new queen. So unlike us, where we kick the teenagers out and the parents get the house to themselves, with bees, it's the other way round. The mother leaves and sets up a new home, and she's able to carry on laying eggs. So that's why it's called a prime swarm when you get the old queen, because she's going to start laying eggs straight away. And then the colony that's left behind, they will rear a new young queen and establish their new home. So it's really key for the health and reproduction, and it's natural. It's not something to be scared of. And here we have, this is a swarm that was in my garden, and I actually had two queens, and this is a really good sign. This is a younger queen who is actually separate from the main swarm. The main swarm is just behind. Huge, great swarm hanging from the tree. And then we have this smaller one here. So there you go. You can see the big swarm. So that's a natural, wonderful, wonderful thing to experience. And I just hope and wish that more of us get the joy of seeing swarms without the fear of thinking we're going to get stung. When a colony swarms, the bees have engorged themselves with honey, which can restrict the sting reflex. So you're actually less likely to be stung when bees are swarming than if you're just handling them normally. And so when you see people with these bee beards, they're using the swarming pheromones to make sure that they're not likely to be stung. So less manipulation. So it's not opening up the hive all the time. It's not fiddling around, killing queen cells. We don't know what the bees know. The bees really do know best. And, if you're crushing queen cells, the bees might know that their queen is failing, or that they need to have spare queens in waiting. And so it's really important that we allow them to do that. So as I mentioned earlier, minimal transportation. So seeing lorries with beehives on. Now, this is a really small truck with just a few beehives. There's a great film that's worth watching called Pollinators, and it's by Peter Nelson, the director Peter Nelson. So do look out for that. And if you get a chance to watch it, then do. And it gives you a really good insight on what happens in the pollination industry with honeybees. So taking only some of the honey. Again, conventionally, you're told to take off a whole box at a time. But what I do with my clients and with my own bees is take them a frame at a time. It takes more time. So if you've got a big honey operation, it isn't practical. But if you've got 1 hive or 3 hives or even 30 hives, it's perfectly feasible. And by doing this, you're only taking the honey that is ripe. So it's only honey that's capped. And also you're working with the bees and you're leaving them a variety of honeys for their own store. What you don't want to do is take a whole crop of one of their medicines and just leave them with one lot behind. The bees self-medicate as they go through the winter. Their cluster will move around the hive, so they might have a few days eating bramble honey, then they might move to clover, because the bees know about the medicinal properties of the plant sources that they take their nectar from. They know this. So how wicked to take away one of their essential parts of their nutritional diet to get them through the winter. Smoke. So instead of smoking, you can use sweet almond oil, you can use clearing boards, lavender water, spray. You don't need to use smoke. There's plenty of alternatives. What I do, which I talk about on my course, is work with the bees, communicating with the bees, listening to the bees, working with their rhythms so that it's the least invasive way of taking the honey. And what we found is when we work that way, all the bee team, we find we don't get stung. You get stung when you're working against the bees, but if you're working with them, you don't need to fear the sting. So the hives, there's so many different types of hives. And as I did in my challenge, one of my little webinars, I shared a book which talks about the varieties of hives that you can get from Northern Bee Books, the actual book. And these are some of the hives that are more naturally used. So Ziegler, you could use a national or WBC hive, Worries, Top Bars, Freedom, Golden Hives, Flow hives. I know they're quite controversial, but I do use flow hives and skep or sun hives. So a Ziegler hive is a hive that's in a tree. And these were very traditional in Eastern Europe and still continue to this day. But one of the big problems is that the older trees are disappearing. So you get these pennies drop every now and again. And the big penny for me last year was understanding that you cannot replace a 200-year-old tree with a sapling. A 200-year-old tree takes 200 years to get to its value. And this is the problem we have, is that bees are looking for holes in trees, but we don't have the old big enough trees, with the hole left. So a Ziegler hive is using a hollow in a tree, covering it up a bit, and you can actually take honey from these. So it's an ancient traditional practice that is still used in some parts of the world. And it normally homes the wild bees. So the wild bees will just fly straight in. So it'll be baited and the bees will go in. And it's great for watching bees. So you can stand at the bottom, you can see them coming and going, you can see the coloured pollen going in. So it's a great way of having bees, but without actually having to manipulate a hive. So if you've got old trees in your grounds, in your garden, or trees that you have access to, you can actually put a Ziegler hive inside. And it's great for conservation because the bees, they keep the tree going, will stop people chopping it down. So that's another way of keeping bees. The national or the William Broughton Carr hive, this is your standard hive. It is really designed for honey extraction, but I do use WBC hives, which are the same as a national, but they've got an outer shell, which adds added insulation. And I do find that it's a really good hive for beginners, because although it's heavier, it's more expensive because you've got more wood, it does seem to protect the bees. They do well in it, and it makes it easier to do sneaky peeks and to keep an eye on the bees without having to open everything up. If you lift up the lid of a national, you've instantly chilled your bees. If you lift the lid of a WBC, you've still got quite a lot of protection. So it's a great way of getting introduced to bees. The boxes are heavy. A WBC hive is quite heavy. So if you're going to be moving it around, or if you're trying to take a whole soup of honey, then it is heavy. So you need help or support. It's good for disease inspection. for many reasons. You've got the frames that are easy to come out, so if you are worried about your bees, it's not too difficult to manipulate the hives. And also you have Varroa boards underneath, but on my course I talk more about Varroa and Varroa boards. So they can cost between £135 and £600, depending on the wood that's used, where you buy them from, the quality of manufacture. So that's the kind of price range that you're looking at. Worry hives, now they are generally a favourite of many natural beekeepers. So either the vertical worry hive or a horizontal top bar hive. So they are a bee-centered design. The horizontal ones were more designed for African beekeepers. So there is a problem with the insulation, particularly in the UK. But the worry hives we find are okay, and it allows the bees to have a long colony, so very much as they would inside a tree trunk. Quite a lot of worry hives and top bars have observation windows, and that's another great way that you can open up a little side window, and you can look straight into the hive so that you can see how the bees are doing without having to open it up. So that's quite a possible thing. You can take honey. It's not easy, but it's great for cut comb. There isn't an inspection board. However, again, when I talk about pests and diseases, there is an argument for solid floors. So if you want to know more about solid floors, then I go into that in more detail on the course. And minimal insulation. So as I already mentioned, they're often made of a cheaper or a thinner wood, and so you don't have the same insulation. So do be aware about where you're placing your hive for how it's going to be affected for the bees. Freedom hives. So these, again, like the golden hives, are made by Matt Somerville. This is one on legs, so it mimics a log hive, but they're beautifully made. Matt Somerville is a boat builder, so he's very skilled, and these are made of cedar, and I love the thatched roof. So you can have them mounted in a tree, so there's quite a few I work with that are mounted in trees, or you can have them freestanding like this. And they're really well insulated, and the bees do love them. They're not really for taking honey, but you can, instead of having the thatched roof, you could actually put a super on top, because they do have a top entrance if you want to use that for honey. So they're comb and propolis friendly, so they really are bee friendly hives. And as I said, honey supers can be added. Then the golden hive. This is the bait hive that I showed earlier on in the talk. This is the larger version. So this is just one big brood box. So you haven't got boxes piled up on top of each other, but the bees do love it. And I must say, the colonies that I take care of that are in these hives, they just love it. They can do long pieces of wild comb. So it has frames, but whereas your normal frame in a conventional hive is sort of quite short, the golden hive has a deep frame, so you can lift the frames out to have a look inside and to see what the bees are doing. And they can make all their own wild comb, so that is an advantage. So whereas the top bar hive is just one stick, and so the bees tend to put the wax, and it will stick along the side of the hives, making it difficult for inspections. So this one uses the frames. It's bee friendly. It's the right shape for the bees. They seem to love it. You can put in observation boards, or you can have a solid floor. So they're quite flexible like that. And you can take honey. So you can remove a frame that has honey on, and you can extract that. So they are well insulated and well ventilated. And we're experimenting with different ways of taking honey from those. And watch this space as we experiment with those. The flow hive. Now, this is there could not be a hive that is more controversial than a flow hive. And it was designed by beekeepers in Australia after 12 years of research. And I've met them, I've spoken to them, and I've worked with the hives. Again, they're quite thin-walled. I mean, because they're manufactured and designed originally in Australia, there is arguments that they're not really for Britain, but I do know beekeepers who do very well with them. And the ones that I've got are a Langstroth size, which is a slightly bigger brood box. And I found that the bees do like that shaped brood box. In hotter climes. So in South Africa, I've worked with beekeepers there who've got flow hives, and they absolutely love them. So even when they were not into their flow hives and thinking, no, I hate them because they've got the plastic frames at the top, they've actually found that it's the least intrusive way of taking honey, but you have to be responsible. But the bees do seem to thrive in these. Once they get going, they do seem to like a flow hive. So it's not a hive to be ignored. It is designed for honey extraction, but their purpose was not to maximize honey. It was to minimize the interruption or the disruption that bees face when you are taking honey. So that was the main reason. So it's the minimal disturbance. So it's got a nice deep brood box, which is great. And they're always modifying their hives. So, you know, the second version was better than the first. So, you know, it's definitely something worth looking at. But you do need to think about plastic. There is an argument that it could encourage greedy beekeepers. So this is why education is key, because if you're a greedy beekeeper, then you're going to lose your bees. Now, this is very relevant to the flow hive. Now, Jonathan Powell, who's very much a tree hive, log hive bee expert, he is also comes from a scientific background, and he is very interested in the frequency that comes with wax. Now, those of you who've been to any of my talks or tours, read my books, you know that I'm also interested in frequency and vibration. And the bees do use the wax comb to communicate with each other. Now, in the flow hive, you have the wax frames. So a lot of natural beekeepers will just say, no, not going to use it. Now, I've also worked with completely plastic hives by a Turkish company called Api May. And there is a place for plastic, because this is not disposable plastic. This is plastic that lasts forever. And as I understand more about the world and sustainability, using wood is not always the best thing that we can do. And the problem is that if we're cutting down trees to make beehives, is that really sustainable? And in some parts of the world, it's so humid that the wood rots. So you're having to use so much wood, and wood is having to be shipped all around the world to make these beehives. So there is a need for plastic, and we do need to address that. So it's looking at what we have, what's available, and what is the overall best choice for our bees. So, you know, there is so much to look at. And then you can have skeps and sun hives. So here's me with my first sun hive that I made, and with some skeps. And some of you have been on my skep making course. So skeps are wonderful because they give really great insulation. They're natural, and you know, I love them. And it's coming back in favor. There's more and more people who are keeping bees in skeps because the bees seem to thrive on it. You can take honey. You could use skeps as supers. You can put glass jars on top. There's all kinds of things you can do. But the sun hive actually has frames, so that you can take the frames in that way, or you can inspect hives. So, you know, things are always adapting. And the great thing about weaving your own hive is you can weave it to whatever shape you want. You can make it big, small, whatever. So it's a really great way of keeping bees. So Chris Parks, if you want to know more about skep hives, then either find my webinars and do my course, or you can look up Chris Parks, because he's a real expert with skep beekeeping. Can be tricky for disease checks, but you tend to find that the bees in there are resilient enough, and you know, it's not really a problem. So then there's, where do you place a hive? There's quite a few things you need to think about. You've got to think where in your garden is a good spot. You've got to consider your neighbours, the flight paths, swarming. So you need to educate your neighbours that your bees will be swarming. If you're living in a built up area, then that might not be so easy. At the moment, if you're a beekeeper and you're in lockdown, then you can keep an eye on your bees and you'll be able to spot them when they're swarming. But if you go out to work and you leave your bees for 12 hours a day through May and June, when they're likely to be swarming, then you could become a nuisance for your neighbours. So you do need to consider how you're going to practice beekeeping and where you're going to keep your bees. But again, on my course, I tell you where to place bait hives so that you're least likely to lose any of your swarms should your colony swarm. So allotments are good. I know some allotments are really for bees and some have rules against them. So you need to talk to your neighbours with your allotments. Orchards are great places as long as they're not sprayed. You do not want to be putting your bees in an orchard where they're going to get drenched in chemicals, because not only will it kill your bees, but it's also going to affect the honey. And if you're going to have honey, there'll be residues of chemicals in it. So really, this is why beekeepers really need to communicate more with farmers and with, agricultural systems, because we need to have that connection. We need to understand what practices are benefiting each other. The farmers need the bees, but we need the farmers too. So it's not a battle of them against us. It's about communicating and working together. So how to find your bees? I love that bees often choose the beekeeper, and beekeepers choose other beekeepers. So I do know of people, and some of you who did my challenge told lovely stories of how somebody else gave you bees, and that's wonderful. And that is lovely, how bees can be shared and gifted. So you can buy a nucleus package. I'm completely against shipping bees in from around the world, because you don't know what you're bringing in. I think we should be using our native stock and our natural stock. So if you're going to buy bees, buy them from a local beekeeper. So you've got bees that are resilient in your area. Swarms, perfect way, catch bees, but you should always put a swarm in a quarantine apiary, because you don't know where they've come from and you don't know if they've got disease. So it's really important, if you catch a swarm, that you keep a close eye on it, so you know how it's going to affect your other bees. Splits, that's a great technical way of managing your bees and preventing swarms. And again, I talk about splits in my course. How much time? How long's a piece of string? This is my mentor with the first swarm from my first colony. And what shocked me was my bees were swarming, and I thought this was an urgent thing, and we had to rush. And he came over, we captured the swarm, put them in the skep, put them on the sheet, and then it was a case of come back in a few hours and see if they'd all gone into the skep, and then wrap them up and move them. So sometimes it will take a lot of time, sometimes it's no time at all. But as a rule, if you're going to be a beekeeper, don't go on holiday between April and August, because you just need to be available for your bees. So with conventional, you are expected to be opening your hives every week. So you've got to allow that kind of time. With natural, you're perhaps not opening your hive every week, but you do need to be checking your bees and sitting with them each week, so that you can keep an eye on their progress. With wild bees, if you've got bees in a tree hive near you, then no time at all. You can just watch them when you're in the area. So they're the minimum amount. To feed or not to feed, a really complex question. What honey is. Honey is produced from the bees collecting nectar from plants. So it has these nutritional benefits, because the plants have all these essential elements, minerals, vitamins, goodness that the bees know about. So it's really hard to replace honey. You just can't replace honey. Honey is honey. And the bees have been shown to go to different plants at different times, because they know, they understand the beneficial effects of certain honeys. Fondant, white sugar, no nutritional benefit whatsoever. And it comes back, and this is where we have comparisons with human medicine, conventional medicine, as opposed to naturopathic medicine, where food is conventionally thought of as fuel, whereas with naturopathic medicine, food is nutrition. So whatever you believe or whatever you want to believe, you need to follow that kind of guideline. So planting for bees, you've got to make sure that your bees have enough food. There's a simple thing to remember, that one colony of bees needs 1 acre of flowering plants and trees. So it's very selfish to go and put in 20, 30 colonies if you haven't got enough food to feed them. And those 50,000 hungry mouths with each colony, they're going to be taking food away from the other pollinators, from the other native and solitary bees. So we do have a responsibility to actually plant for our bees. So how can you help bees but without keeping them? So the most important thing is buy, eat and grow organic or chemical-free food. If you do that, you're changing agriculture, you're saving your bees. And not only that, it's better for you, because if the chemicals aren't good for the bees, what on earth are the chemicals doing for us? Stop using chemicals in your garden. Every time you spray something, it's going into the soil and some plant is drinking up that chemical, and then that plant is feeding an insect or a bird. And if you have poisoned insects, you then have poisoned birds who eat those insects. So we just have to stop using chemicals. It's as simple as that. We've gone beyond a tipping point. There's no excuse to use chemicals anymore. Educate yourself and others. So just keep spreading the news. When you learn a little fact about bees and about health and about chemicals, then just share it, because so many people don't even question, don't even think about it. And most of us don't know what we don't know. So if you know something, share it, because then that helps make the world a better place. And your purchase power, where you spend your money, has a massive, massive impact. If you don't like what a company is doing to the environment or with their products, don't buy it. We have a choice. We have so many choices. So make sure that your pound or your dollar, it goes and it has an impact, because it really does. And if you're buying from small local farmers, they may not be certified organic, but they may not be using chemicals. And that's the thing. It's not just about the label, it's understanding the story of who it is you're buying from. So how can we, me and my bee team, how can we help you? Well, we offer management and care of your own bees. So if you want to have a colony of bees, but you don't have the time or the inclination to be caring for them, then we offer that service. But that is limited each year to how many colonies we can look after. We also do swarm collection and housing. So if you find a swarm moves into your garden and you don't want them, then you can get in touch with me and we will remove them, as long as it's within a reasonable distance, or I can at least advise you where you can go to get help with that. We also offer consultancy to individuals, hotels, businesses and farms. So if you want to know anything about bees, how you can help bees, pollinators, what you need to plant for them, how to protect them, or if you want to have bees and produce your own honey, if you want to have bees in a sustainable way, then we're your people. Come and talk to me. We also have an amazing network of honey producers, honey suppliers, distributors, and honey and bee experts. So, you know, if you've got any questions about bees, then come to us. And then honey sensory analysis. I wasn't able to do my exam in October because it was held in Italy, and obviously the transport flying was not allowed then, so I wasn't able to go. But I have been studying honey sensory analysis for the last 3 years, and I also know of some great experts. I work as a honey judge. So if you want to know a bit more about your honey and what its source is, then I can help with that as well. And I have my online naturopathic beekeeping course. So if you want to know in more depth about how to keep bees in a naturopathic way, following the rules of nature, then join my course. So the course gives you advice on hives, finding bees, where to place them, how to transition. So if you're a conventional beekeeper and you want to transition to a more natural way, then I give you all the tools that you need and the references you need to help with that. And also care and management of pests and diseases. As a natural beekeeper, you don't ignore pests and diseases. You embrace them, you have to understand them, and you have to take more preventative care and be more aware of the danger signs so that you can protect your bees and keep them healthy. So I go through everything that you need to know to understand more about pests and diseases, what are the causes, as much as anything. And then also products from the hive. So the extraction, preparation, if you want to take honey, propolis, pollen, you know, any of the products that come from the hive, we talk about that and how you can process them in a safe and a sustainable way. And also you get a month by month guide to bee care. So the students who just finished the course last autumn, they've just received a calendar which has each month has a guide on what you need to be doing for bees in a naturopathic way for that month. So here's the naturopathic beekeeping course. If you want to learn more about that course and my SCEP course, you just go to that website, which is courses.paulacarnell.com. So that's all you need to go to. And I'll put all these links in the comments in a bit. My next course, it starts next Thursday. So that's the naturopathic course. I have a limited number of spaces because I want to give as much personal help as I can. So although you're taught in a group, we have 4 modules that we hopefully all work through together. But it's really nice to work as a team because we do all learn from each other. And so we go through each module each week, having a live video call session and you also have downloadable books and you have downloadable worksheets and a quiz, so I can test that you have understood what you've gone through. So hopefully it's fun as well as informative. And if I'm doing a special deal, so if you buy your place today, you will receive, in addition to the course, you'll also get the SCEP making course free, which has a value of £87. You'll get signed copies of A to B's, my book, and the other book, Bees in Bhutan. So that has a value of just under £26. You'll also get my tea towel, which is the Plants for Bees tea towel. So I will post these out to you. And you'll get the downloadable ebook of Principles of Naturopathic Beekeeping. And all of that is £347. So you'll save £128. Now that offer only goes until Saturday evening, 6 o'clock on Saturday. So, you know, if you want to take part of that offer, then you really need to book as soon as you can. So I've already got some people enrolled on this course. I've got limited spaces. So it's really important that if you want to be part of this course, then you book now. Now, I won't be running it again until later in the year because it's the winter time. This is your time to prepare for bees. The swarm season starts in April. If you want to get hives, you need to be organised in the next few weeks because a lot of hive suppliers are busy. They have advance orders and you want to get your hive in time for the season to begin. And also because the bees are asleep at the moment, now is the time to be doing your studying, to do your research so that you're prepared for taking bees into your life in the spring. So that's the reason for doing that. So there's my special offer, and I've got copies of my books here. Now I've been doing a challenge. So there's the books, both illustrated by me with photographs or drawings. Now, if you took part in the challenge, here are the winners. So we've got, somebody's got a free spot on the course, and that is Mick Richens. So these people all did all 3 parts of the challenge and they shared them with me or in the group. And so well done, Mick. You have won the free naturopathic beekeeping course. So I'm hoping you can show up next week and we'll see you there. Then Michael Archibald, you've won the SCEP making course. Now, Mick, because he's getting the beekeeping course, he'll actually get the SCEP course free because that's the special deal. So Mick and Michael, I expect you both to be making SCEPs this winter too. And Lisa, well done. You get the signed book bundle. So thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who took part. I just loved it. I loved seeing your maps. I loved hearing about your reasons why and why people want bees. And I'm really sorry that I couldn't give you all prizes. I would love to. I would love to have been able to do that, but I couldn't. So thank you very much. And I hope those of you who did the challenge got to learn plenty and it's inspired you to get started with beekeeping. So congratulations and thank you very much. So thank you for joining me. And if you've got any questions, type them in the box and I will answer them. And If not, you can always message me, you can send me emails, and I will do my best to answer them. And also, if you're not in my group, Creating a Buzz, do ask to join the group, and that's where you'll get access to my videos and any training and all the challenges. And it's a place where I can hang out, I can do my lives, I can talk to you and share any tips and things with what's going on. So do ask to join the group. So it's Creating a Buzz. So, and those of you who've won, if you could email me or let me have your address, and then I can put packages on their way to you. So here we go. So thank you very much for joining me. Do type away if you've got a question. And thank you. And I hope you've learned lots about naturopathic beekeeping. And I hope you learned lots from doing the challenge. So it hopefully has set you up so that you know now how to get started and to have a deeper relationship with your bees. All right, now I've just been messaged one question. How long does the course take? Right, the course, it takes 4 weeks, but because I keep the numbers small, I work very much on who is on the course. So it's very much a case of if people are needing a bit more time. So for instance, the third module with pests and diseases is quite intensive. And so with the last module, we then had a week's break and then we came back and did the final module. So I do like to work with everyone, and every live session is recorded and you get access to it in the course platform. And it is geared up for, again, because it's small numbers, it is geared up for people who want to know more about beekeeping, even if they've got some experience. So although we go back to the basics, we do cover things in a lot more detail. And if you've got particular problems, then I do my best to address them through the course. So it really is a personal course. And you will get to have a much greater understanding of what the latest scientists are saying, what everyone is saying about, about beekeeping, and how we can back up the naturopathic way. When I first started beekeeping and I would question things like feeding sugar or using smoke, it was almost heretic, and I would get criticized, and it was really hurtful, because a lot of my feelings, first of all, came from my intuition. I just felt things were wrong, but I didn't have the science to back it up. And what's so exciting now is that the science is there. And so things that so many of us intuitively knew needed to be done or needed to not be done, we've now got the science backing it up. So on the course, I give you that proof. So if you feel uncomfortable about admitting that you're not using chemicals in your hive, or admitting that you don't want to feed them sugar, you've now got the science to back it up. I have spent years reading and going to lectures and meeting up with these experts so that I've got that knowledge, that proof, and that helps us all. If we know we're not alone, it gives us the confidence to actually do what we feel is right. And the world now needs more caring nature protectors, and particularly bee protectors. And the bees are the indicator species, and they connect everything. They connect the plants with the humans through the honey, and the honey is medicine, and we need to listen to the bees. As I've said so many times, they've been here 150 million years. They know what they're doing. So I'm going to close now. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm excited to be teaching you too. So for those of you who are going to be joining me on the course, we'll meet up next week. You'll get messages with the links on how to get into the course, and I will also send you all the details that you need to know on starting the course. So I look forward to a new batch of naturopathic beekeepers being released into the world at the end of this course. So thank you so much, and I will see you soon. And don't forget to get your place now to get all the special deals, and question, send me a message if you've got any questions. So thank you very much, everyone, and I will see you next week in the course. Bye.